All right, let's remind ourselves what we were doing. So if I have these two vectors, a1 and a2, and I have this vector b, so the span of a1 and a2 are all the linear combinations of these two vectors, and the span of these two vectors is going to be a plane. And it's going to go through the origin, and I'll talk about why that is in a bit. We're in R3 because these are 3 by 1 vectors. So is B in that plane, or is B a linear combination of these, or is this linear system consistent? All right, let's go do it. So I know I'm going to be putting together the augmented system, or the augmented matrix. All right, now I'm going to be working it so that I get a 0 in these two positions, right? So I'm going to take 2 times row 1 and add it to row 2. And then I'm going to take a negative 3 times row 1 and add it to row 3. So I'm going to keep the first row the same. The second row turns into this. The third row turns into this. Okay. So instead of dividing through by negative 3, I'm going to take advantage of these two numbers being similar. And I'm going to say, let's multiply row 2 by negative 4 and add it to row 3. So the first row stays the same. The second row stays the same. And this last row turns into this. All right. So this is my augmented matrix. I have a pivot in the last column. So this system is inconsistent. So there is no solution. So that means, to answer the question, B is not in the span of these two vectors. All right, so same kind of question. Here's a vector y, and I want to know, is y in the span of these three vectors? So are there variables? So I want to find, is there an x1 times v1? Is there an x2 times v2? And is there an x3 times v3 that gets me to the vector y? So that's the question being asked. So let's put together our augmented matrix. Okay, so I see if I add together row 1 and row 2, that's going to get me a 0 in this position. And I'm going to say, let's multiply row 1 by 2 and add it to row 3. Add it to row 3. All right, so let's do that. And I'm going to keep the first row the same. So the second row and the third row. Okay. So I see now I've got a 1 in this pivot, so that's good. So I want to get a 0 here. So I'm going to say multiply row 2 by negative 3 and add it to row 3. Okay, I'm keeping the same row 1. I'm going to carry this one along, and when I do this I get 0, 0, 0, h minus 5. Okay, so remember this is an augmented system, and I have a pivot here and a pivot here, and I don't want to have a pivot in this last column. So in order for this to be true, for this to be consistent, h has to equal 5 to be consistent, for there to be a solution. H has to equal 5.